All right, that was close. Yesterday, we almost messed up the entire 365-day challenge. By we, I mean me, because I had a plan. I got down to our vacation and I filmed in the backyard. You saw the pool video yesterday, going through the introduction of how successful people think. Had the video off film, thought it was uploaded. It actually wasn't. The internet went down at some point. And it was 10:30 at night before I realized that it didn't post. So had to push it through. Well, we're going to continue on our journey. Found a little spot to drink some coffee and to talk with you about how successful people think. Chapter 1, we're going to dive into that a little bit today. Again, get up in the morning, be consistent, read it, highlight it. Just got done with that. The first chapter really is about cultivating big picture thinking. Big picture thinking. We need big picture thinking. We got to see the entirety of how the plan works together and where we're going and how all the pieces fit. I got to think about a puzzle, right? You need to see the box top so you know where the pieces go. But I don't think the enemy of big picture thinking for most of us, you're a leader, you're a high performer. I don't think the enemy is small picture thinking, because you usually don't think like that. I think the enemy is right now thinking. Sometimes we trade what we want long term for what feels good in the short term. We trade where we want to go in the long term because we want to break in the short term. That's right now thinking. And that can lead to making poor decisions that do feel like the pressure's let off maybe short term, but they aren't healthy for us. They aren't healthy for the direction that we're trying to go, for what we want to do with our team, for what we want to accomplish from a result standpoint. And it actually produces later issues. Short-term decisions, when you're leading at a high level, can produce later issues. It's one of the things I thought about as I was reading this chapter. I also thought about, maybe you said this phrase, this is never going to be over. This is never going to end. We kind of get stuck in a season. I think about when my kids were younger and they didn't sleep at night. We had 2 horrible sleepers. And I'd say, this is never going to be over. This is never going to end. I'm always going to feel like a zombie. Be careful about saying never and be careful about saying always, because those usually aren't true. You're just in a season. You're just stuck in a season, and that's why cultivating big picture thinking is so important. I want to raise great kids who add value to society, who love people, who accomplish much. So I was only in a season of them not sleeping. I had to think big picture, which really brings this principle that I heard many years ago that I have written down. I don't know exactly where I heard it, so I can't give the credit because I don't know who said it, but it stuck with me. And it's, when in doubt, zoom out. When in doubt, zoom out. You're in this season and all you see is this little part. Okay, when in doubt, zoom out. Look at the big picture. And when you zoom out, I think a few things happen that I noted here in the chapter. Number 1, you see the whole picture. Kind of like what we just talked about there. You see the whole picture. There was a quote here on, I think it was on page 6. Yeah, Alvin Toffler. He says, you've got to think about big things while you're doing the small things so that all the small things go in the right direction. That's the benefit of zooming out. You're thinking about the big things so you can do the small things so you can head in the right direction. You've got to see the whole picture. If you're only seeing what's in front of you, at times you can feel defeated, exhausted, frustrated. When in doubt, zoom out. See the whole picture. The other thing we do when we zoom out is we see how it impacts others. I love let's see, it was on page 7. Yeah, all human interactions are enhanced by the ability to put yourself in other people's shoes. Walk a mile in someone else's shoes. In fact, it was a different John Maxwell book. I think it was The Self-Aware Leader that I made a note in the margin that said, great leaders see through the eyes of loyal followers. Great leaders see through the eyes of loyal followers. What does it look like to follow you in your organization? What does it look like to work alongside of you? Something we should be thinking about. We've got to put ourselves in other people's shoes. And I think when we're so narrow focused on the moment or the season that we're stuck in, we don't put ourselves in other people's shoes. We actually become more selfish, thinking about, how does this impact me? How does this help me? How does this advance me? But when we zoom out, we see how it impacts others. And then the third one that stuck out to me is, when we zoom out, we see the benefit of staying the course. Of staying the course. You're going to be faced with a lot of decisions on your journey. And there's going to be a lot of off-ramps, a lot of moments that make it really easy to quit. Well, when you zoom out, it makes it easier to stay the course. On page 8, it says, the person who forgets the ultimate is a slave to the immediate. So important. What's the ultimate? What does the zoom out look like? Because when we are clear on that picture, on that vision, then we can put up with the bumps, bruises, detours along the way. I want you to think about it like a GPS. When you lock in that destination, when you lock in that vision, if you get delayed, if you get rerouted, it's okay. You get delayed or rerouted because you're eventually going to get to the destination. You might have to go around a way that you didn't expect. You might have to slow down at periods you didn't think you needed to slow down at. It's okay. You're on the way to the destination. So I think that's very important to remember. Stay the course. The big picture helps us stay the course. You know, one of the things I'll tell you as we close this video today on chapter 1, on page 7, it says, big picture thinkers don't let the grind get to them because they don't lose sight of the all-important overview. Very similar to what we were just talking about there. But here's what I wrote in the margin. What's your why and where does it live? It's a good practical application of what we're talking about. What's your why? Why do you do what you do? I think a few weeks ago I said in a video, your why has to make you cry. It does. It has to be compelling. It has to pull you in that direction. You don't have to push yourself because your why is pulling you to where you want to go. So what's your why? And then that second part is very important. Where does it live? Do you have it written down? Do you have it written down where you can see it? Can you keep it in front of you? Because out of sight equals out of mind. So what's your why and where does it live? I'm going to encourage you, as you start thinking big, to take that and put that into action. Sit down, give yourself 15 minutes to think about, why are you doing what you're doing? Zoom out and then find a place where you're going to see that regularly. And then I love it on page 10, closing the chapter. Here's what John Maxwell says. Most people are married mentally to the status quo. They want what was, not what can be. That's where most people are. Most people are married to the status quo. They're thinking about the past, talking about the past, living in the past, not thinking about the bigness of the future, not thinking about how many people they're going to help down the road, not thinking about how their life is going to be different if they just stay the course, if they just zoom out. But you're different. You're not most people. So I'm going to encourage you to think big, cultivate big thinking. Well, that's chapter 1. Together, I hope there's some insight in there for you. I hope you find ways you can take practical application out of this chapter. If you haven't got the book yet, I'm going to again recommend picking this book up. It's small, but it is powerful. Tomorrow, you and I are going to talk about engaging in focused thinking. I'll see you then. You're on camera!